Greetings guys, it's Kazor. Do you want to be a Switch Axe Pro? Then keep watching. This will be a quick but detailed video to get you playing this weapon ASAP. We will briefly talk about everything this weapon can do, the available switch skills, what Phials are, the best skills for the weapon, your main combo, and some late game builds to choose from. With that being said, let's get right into it. Switch Axe pros and cons. Let's start with the pros. Switch Axe is fun as hell. It is actually one of the most versatile weapons in the game. Switch Axe deals insane damage during openings. If a monster is toppled, you can make it minced meat within seconds. All of the Silkbind moves are fantastic. You can have any sort of loadout and playstyle you want. Now the cons. Switch Axe is pretty hard to play. You have to learn what your weapon does in both forms, need to pay attention to your switch gauge, your sharpness, your positioning, and many more. One con used to be its lack of defensive skills, but with the new wire step and elemental burst counter, that is no longer the case. Now let's talk about actually playing with the Switch Axe. Everybody has had a PlayStation at least once in their life, right? I will be using PlayStation buttons as a main reference for this video for convenience sakes. Switch Axe is a combination of an axe and a sword. During axe mode, you can move a little quicker, like holding a longsword. Sword mode, however, moves very slow, like holding a greatsword. When playing Switch Axe, you can see a bar next to your weapon's sharpness. Axe attacks fill this bar up. Attacking with sword will deplete this bar. Can you see this little point here? Once you go past this point during axe, you can morph into sword mode. If you are below this point, instead of morphing, your weapon will reload. We will talk about that in a bit. During sword attacks, you also start charging your weapon's amped gauge. Once you fill this up, your weapon will enter the amped state. Attacking while your weapon is amped will do some extra Phial explosions. The damage really adds up, so be sure to always have your weapon amped for most of the hunt. This effect lasts for 45 seconds. Now let's talk about the Phials real quick. There's 6 different types of Phials: Power, Elemental, Poison, Paralysis, Exhaust, and Dragon. Power Phial increases your physical damage. Elemental Phial increases your elemental damage. Poison applies poison. Paralysis applies paralysis. Exhaust steals stamina from the monster. And Dragon adds dragon element to your attacks. Depending on the Phial type of your weapon, the amped gauge will fill up differently. Dragon and Poison Phials fill the gauge the fastest, while Power fills it the slowest. The rest are normal. If a weapon has its element or status under the Phial type instead of the weapon's sharpness while looking at its stats, it means that only the sword can apply that element or status and not the axe. Keep that in mind. Let's move on to the attacks, starting with the axe. Pressing triangle while standing still will cycle between overhead slash, side slash, and rising slash. Pressing circle at any time during an attack or even on its own will initiate a wild swing. Keep pressing circle to continue swinging. This will drain your stamina and it will automatically stop when your stamina has run out. After one wild swing, pressing triangle will do an overhead slash. If you did 2 or more wild swings, pressing triangle would do a heavy slam. Using a heavy slam will put you into maximum potency state. With this buff, you will charge your amped state much faster when using the sword. Always use this skill with any Phial that is not poison or dragon to fill your amped gauge faster. Pressing circle while pointing the analog stick away from the hunter's direction will perform a fade slash. Make sure to master it, as it is a great attack for repositioning. Pressing circle and triangle will initiate a rising slash. You can cycle between circle and triangle plus triangle to do the basic triangle combo without the side slash. This is great at reaching high monster parts like Anjanath's tail. Press R2 while standing still to swap to sword mode. Pressing R2 after any attack will swap you to sword while performing a sword attack. Spamming R2 will cycle between an axe morph slash and a sword morph slash. Don't do this. Trying to swap to sword when your switch gauge is below the white point we mentioned will initiate a reload instead. This will leave you vulnerable. Never do this. Always make sure your gauge is above this point before you swap to sword. Moving on to the sword attacks. Pressing triangle while standing still will cycle between overhead, left rising, and right rising slashes. Your hunter will always stand still when performing this, so don't worry about mispositioning once you've started the combo. Pressing circle at any time during the previous combo, or even on its own, will have our weapon do a double slash. Press circle again to do a Heavenward Fury. This move is strong but very slow, and will leave you open to monsters' attacks. as you can't roll or use a wirebug skill during this time. The payoff is not worth the risk. Never use this move. Pressing triangle and circle at the same time will initiate an elemental discharge. Keep spamming the triangle button to do an elemental discharge finisher. If this move connects, it will greatly fill your empty gauge at the cost of your switch gauge. It also consumes a lot of sharpness, like all explosions. After this move, you are left quite vulnerable for some time, while your sword morphs back to an axe. If you want to cancel this move, you can always point the analog stick opposite to your hunter's direction and press triangle. This will initiate a quick finishing discharge, which has a very forgiving and faster end animation. A good switch axe player knows when it's best to do this instead of going for the full finisher. If you use your elemental discharge while in the amped state, your hunter will literally climb on the monster's part you were targeting, initiating the move from that location. Again, pressing triangle multiple times will initiate an elemental discharge finisher. If you don't press anything, or if you move the analog stick away from your target's direction and press triangle, your hunter will do a zero-sum discharge finisher, again with a much faster and forgiving animation. The final explosion doesn't care about monsters' hardpoints, so if you want to break a monster's part that doesn't take much damage, like Valstrak's wings, using this move against them will do some nice damage and possibly break the part after a couple of times, giving you more targeted rewards at the end of the quest. Finally, pressing R2 while in sword mode will do an axe morph attack and swap you back to axe mode. Let's move on to the switch skills. The first one is between forward slash and forward overhead slash. Always go for the second option. That makes our hunter do a huge gap closing attack during axe mode while also dealing more damage. It is amazing to close gaps with this attack instead of rolling. The second one is between finishing discharge and compressed finishing discharge. Compressed finishing discharge gives you super armor and then delivers a not as strong but quite fast elemental discharge before morphing you back to axe. Whether you use any of the two is a personal preference. You can use both in different pages of your swap scrolls. However, I find the regular finishing discharge much better, since it gives you more or less damage depending on whether you cancel the move prematurely, and also the fact that you can ride monsters is amazing, and I personally would never give that up. The third one is between axe wild sweep and two-stage morph / combo. Always go for the second option here. It's the superior of the two, giving you more damage while morphing between attacks in sword mode and fills the switch gauge faster during axe mode. It also pairs fantastically with the rapid morph skill. The fourth one is between Invincible Gambit, Soaring Wyvern Blade and Wire Step. Invincible Gambit is a good skill, giving you super armor throughout the whole cast of the move, helps with closing gaps and is very mobile. Be careful, as you will still take some damage if hit by a monster during this animation. Soaring Wyvern Blade, as the name suggests, uses a wirebug to soar you into the sky. Press triangle before you touch the floor to do an advancing slash. This helps a lot with building up the amp state if it connects, while also dealing good damage through an explosion after a while in the place of impact. You can do this advancing slash at any time when you're airborne with your weapon drawn, even after a zero-sum discharge finisher. Finally, we have the Wire Step. With this skill, you use a wirebug to do an almost 45-degree spin to get out of the monster's attacks and reposition. This skill provides you with invincibility frames, therefore you can use it to nullify monsters' attacks and roars. This skill has a very fast recovery rate, which makes it amazing. It also works with skills like Blade Scale Hone, Status Trigger and Adrenaline Rush, since it counts as an evasion. I have used all three of these skills many times, and I ended up having Wire Step on my red scroll and Soaring Wyvern Blade on my blue scroll. All skills are great honestly, but Wire Step is just too good of an evade skill to avoid, and also a must with Status Trigger and Adrenaline Rush, and if you watch my other video about poison, you will know that I love this playstyle. Soaring Wyvern Blade is amazing to use right after a zero-sum discharge finisher, and since I'm not using compressed finishing discharge, this is a no-brainer for me. The fifth and final option is between Switch Charger and Elemental Burst Counter. Both of these skills are amazing. The Switch Charger costs one wirebug, and you do a small dash towards the direction of your analog stick, reloading 40% of your weapon's switch gauge in the process. It's a really good skill to put you above the threshold for the sword morph, instead of using that horrible reload. The Elemental Burst Counter is a new skill with Sunbreak, and boy is it not the best thing ever. This skill uses 2 wirebugs to put you into a defensive stance while rapidly depleting your switch gauge. Press R2 to do an elemental burst. However, if you press R2 when the monster is about to hit you, you will also do a powerful finisher, which gives you super armor for the whole animation, deals very good damage, and puts you straight into amped state, just like that. An absolutely amazing skill that you need to master if you want to be a great Switch Axe player. The recovery speed for the 2 wirebugs after you use this move is very fast, and there's a good chance you can counter every other move with this if you like to do so. Make sure to be careful as it needs some time to cast, but is super forgiving, much more than the long short counters. Now let's break down your basic combo. If you are using 2-stage morph / combo as a switch skill, which should always be the case, the combo should be like this. When your weapon is not in the amped state, get into sword mode and cycle between double slash and overhead slash. During the amped state and with your weapon shift or in axe mode, your combo is this: R2, circle, R2, R2, circle, R2, R2, circle, and keep cycling through that. This is your bread and butter combo when you find an opening. It is pretty much the best combo. I don't think there's any better one at the moment. Let me know down in the comments if you know of any better combos for different situations with this weapon. Moving on to the skills that pair greatly with the Switch Axe. You can use any of these depending on your preference and playstyle. Rapid Morph. Never skip this skill. It is simply amazing. It speeds up your morph speed and damage dealt by morph attacks. By far the best skill for the Switch Axe. Make sure to slot it in. Weakness Exploit and Critical Boost. As with most weapons, but especially on the Switch Axe, these skills are a must in order to deal as much damage as possible to the monster's weak points. Attack Boost. Try to go for a minimum of 4 attack in order to get the extra damage it gives you. Maximum Might and or Critical Eye. In order to deal the most optimal damage, we need to have 100% affinity, which means 100% chance to deal critical hits. Maximum Might pairs amazingly with the Switch Axe, since it is only 3 level 2 slots for plus 30% affinity. If you like rolling and hopping around a lot, don't go for Maximum Might and go for Critical Eye instead. Evade Extender and Evade Window. Both of these skills are great to reposition and can be very versatile. They are also applied to your wire step. Not necessary, but very fun to use. Blade Scale Hone. Blade Scale Hone was a new skill with Sunbreak and it refreshes our sharpness when evading. Since wire step is an evasion skill, they can pair greatly. If you play the Evade Window Switch Axe build, slotting in Blade Scale Hone somehow will be a great way to keep your sharpness up at all times. Razor Sharp. You will be surprised at how ridiculously fast your sharpness drops when playing this weapon. Razor Sharp helps mitigate some of that loss in order to maintain your sharpness for longer. Protective Polish and Speed Sharpening. If you don't like to rely on Razor Sharp for your weapon to maintain sharpness, Protective Polish is a very good option also. This skill prevents your weapon from losing sharpness for 30, 60 or 90 seconds depending on skill level. Pair that with Speed Sharpening, which greatly reduces the sharpening animation, and you will have indestructible sharpness. Power Prolonger and Focus. These skills are not necessary at all, and you won't need to use them really, but I wanted to show you how they work with the Switch Axe. Power Prolonger extends your ramped state from 45 seconds to 60, 72 and 90 seconds depending on skill level, while Focus helps you with filling up the switch and amped gauges during axe and sword attacks respectively. As for Rampage decorations, there's 3 main options: the Switcher Jewel 3, Elembane Jewel 3, and the Anti-Aerial, Anti-Dragon and Fact Exploit Jewels 2. I personally always go for the Switcher Jewel, since I use a lot of morph attacks. Therefore, I always aim for weapons that have a tier 3 Rampage slot. However, all of these are quite good. Elembane Jewel deals more damage to monsters that are weak to the element your weapon bears, while the Anti-Aerial, Anti-Dragon and Fact Exploit Jewels deal more damage to specific monsters depending on their type. You can use the following picture for reference. As already mentioned, Wire Step works like a normal evade, so Blade Scale Hone, Status Trigger and Adrenaline Rush are fantastic with it. Evade Extender and Evade Window are also applied. If you want to wake up a monster, you have 2 ways to do so. As you know, the first damage a sleeping monster takes is doubled. The best value you can get out of a sleeping monster is either by A. trying to hit it with the last explosion of your elemental discharge, or B. wake it up with barrel bombs and your elemental burst counter. In order for the counter to work, you need to be a little far from the barrel. Standing on top of it will not proc the power finisher, and you will miss a ton of damage, as well as your transition to the amped state. After using a zero-sum discharge finisher, you can follow up with a soaring wyvern blade while mid-air to get back in the fight. Also, don't forget that the wild swing reduces your stamina and will cancel your maximum might until your stamina is full again for over 3 seconds. Finishing off, I will showcase the switch axe builds I'm currently swapping between. For most of my builds, I'm using a ridiculously likey attack up 3, weakness exploit 2 with a 3-1-1 slot. However, you don't need 7 attack, 4 is just great. Any talisman with either weakness exploit, maximum might or critical boost 2 with 1 level 2 slot will get you the same results, so don't get discouraged. You can try lots of different weapons and builds, just keep in mind the must-have skills I mentioned before. Also, I love the Switcher Jewel 3, so I almost always go for weapons with a level 3 Rampage slot. For raw damage, I haven't tried to go for the best possible option, so I'm currently using a Abyssal Torrent, which is Gazmagorm's weapon. It has a great purple sharpness, but unfortunately an elemental Phial with only 15 dragon. It's still not bad at all to use. For ice, I used Daora's Ajniha, Kushala Daora's weapon. Truly an amazing weapon with good raw, 58 ice, a 3 rampage slot, and some purple sharpness. Power Phial works great here. Elemental is not a necessity. This weapon is the best option for ice. For dragon, I choose the Calamitous Axe of the Death Stance tree. With 33 raw attack, 60 dragon and an elemental Phial, this is truly a great weapon. It unfortunately has white sharpness, but that's not bad at all. The 2 extra level 2 slots make up for that. For water, I use the Voidbringer Axe, Almudron's weapon. This weapon has an insane 74 element, along with good white and very decent raw. Pair that with the elemental Phial, and you have a shredder for monsters weak to water. For fire, I use the Volcanic Switch, Magma Almudron's weapon. Can this get any better? 320 raw with good white sharpness and a whopping 78 fire with an elemental Phial? Sign me up! Truly a must-have weapon for all Switch Axe players. For thunder, I use Full Mark Plus, Ketsu's weapon. It has 330 raw attack with good white sharpness and a good 55 thunder with an elemental Phial. The only reason I go for this axe over Narwa's is the level 3 Rampage decoration. You can also play Narwa's weapon for thunder element. And now, my baby and absolute favorite, Thanatos Serpent, the Remobra switch axe for poison. For this weapon, I'm using the new status trigger skill, by wearing Golden Rathian helmet and belt, along with Espina's hands. Using Wire Step at a good timing activates my status trigger, making poison last forever. Chain Crit for the extra sweet damage during a big combo, 4A3 along with Maximum Might 2 gives me 40% affinity when my stamina is full, plus 50% affinity when hitting monsters' weak spots, that makes me go to 90% affinity. If you take a Palico with you, it can give you the 10% affinity you're missing, if you find that a big deal. Critical Boost, Rapid Morph and Evade Window all join up to make this beautiful set. Make sure to not sleep on poison. As I've said in my poison video before the Nargacugas expansion came out, 4A is a phenomenal skill, and it got more support than I could ever imagine. Poison Dual Blades are fantastic with the set you see on the screen, as long as you slot Marathon Runner instead of Rapid Morph. With that, we have covered everything you need to know about the Switch Axe. Now it's up to you to take this knowledge to the training area and practice before you become a master of this wonderful weapon. As always, thank you all for watching until this point. Make sure to leave a like if you found this video useful, subscribe for more content, and ring the bell to be notified about new videos. Until then, stay safe.